wore off.
I know, it's so beautiful. And it's such a beautiful day. And like the 90s in Cedar aren't really bad. Like, I mean, it's not 110, it's not 125. So we are a little grateful for that. But before we get started with Wired Wednesday with one of my favorite co-hosts, Scott Stubbs, I do want to touch on the insurance thing that you brought up in your prior segment. Every cost has gone up. Insurance has also gone up. And it's not out of just, oh, we're going to raise rates. Everything is more expensive. I was on a webinar last week, one of the wildfires in New Mexico specifically, okay? Farm Bureau alone, okay, has however many houses insured, right? Within a half a mile of the fire and even a 2-mile radius. The total insured value of just one company could be over $400 million, right? Let alone all of the individual houses in that specific area, right? So then you go into Cedar City specifically, right? If each house is valued, even across this East Bench, right? We have some high value houses, we have some mixed housing, like condos and townhouses and things. And then we have older homes because the 400 block was, established, I think in like the 60s, 70s, and 80s, right? Most of that.
Right.
Each house still has a replacement value of at least $400,000, right? So then you start adding up every house you drive past. That's a lot of total insured value. No wonder houses are going up, and then the wildfires and all the different things. So I'm not saying it's not just out of principle. I'm saying everything in the world is more expensive. And so I don't like insurance premiums just as much as the next person, but I do understand they're a catastrophic protection because I don't have, $500,000 or $600,000 just to rebuild my own house.
Yeah, you don't?
No.
I thought you carried that around all the time.
If my pockets were that big, I'd have to wear a different skirt. Good morning, it's Wired Wednesday with McKenna Hansen. And we love having the Utah Farm Bureau Federation Iron County president on. It's Scott Stubbs, and we love just being able to talk ag. So how are you? How are things? How was the spring season?
The spring season was wild, and like you said, it's gotten really kind of warm for June, but things are going good. Most of the animals are on the mountain now. You're still going to maybe run into a few trailing and everything. We've been working on a trail map for Iron County, and it has really been a big job, and I appreciate all the work the county's put into it. But we've identified all the trails in Iron County, and so that we don't have to use every little trail every year to keep it valid. So guys are trying to avoid the traffic and everything. But I just ask everybody out there, when you encounter, livestock on the road, be courteous and slow down and watch for people to signal you. They'll usually try and help you get by, and if they don't, then that means just hold on a minute and they'll be out of your way. But this has been a great thing that the county's put together, and I think that we're going to see all the counties around us adopt it because it is really cool.
Well, and what's really critical about that is, we as producers, which also feed and clothe America, by the way, you're able to get from point A to point B without being harassed, basically. Right? The public can't call into the local law enforcement and say, how dare they walk across my lawn or something, right? Especially with the growth and development that we've been happening, those livestock trails will protect getting from point A to point B as efficiently and as safely as possible.
So with agriculture, there's dust, there's smell, I guess, there's livestock on the road, there's baler lights at night, there's all these things, but we're really not trying to destroy America. We are trying to feed America. That's what we're doing.
Right, and I think that's the best statement of the morning. Because agriculture, there's 5% of you nationwide, less than 5%.
1% are in ag.
Are actively in ag of the 99%, and that's a huge responsibility. And so I'm very grateful for you guys because it's keeping Iron County what it is.
And when we get talking about ag, I mean, we've got a lot of little small producers too, and they're ag. We need to start thinking about everywhere we grow food, because right now the United States is a net importer of food. We've got to take that back. It's kind of kind of sad to think 20 years ago we was the world's leader in ag, and now we're importing more than we're exporting. That's what that means. And so all these little operations, your gardens and things are important. This coming, on the 11th of July, we have a guy coming that is going to talk about fertilizer for our gardens and our lawns and our house plants and stuff at our monthly meeting. And I think at this time it's important because all phases of growing food are agriculture, and they're very important.
Absolutely. Even, I mean, I live in Cedar City. Like, I don't have acreage or anything, but I can grow a couple tomato plants and a couple of, herbs and things. I just harvested probably 5 pounds of fresh oregano, like a lot of oregano. You use teaspoons in recipes, right? But every little bit counts, and every little bit keeps us more connected, to producing and to the food and to the way of life that literally is life itself.
Yeah. Well, it's so important for our national defense that we're able to feed ourselves, because you can't fight when you're hungry.
No. And
it's really scary right now. You hear what's going on in the world, and maybe we're not as strong right now with the leadership we have, and so it's real important that we maintain our food security.
Right. It's a huge disparity, because one would say that a lot of the wars that happened between the 30s and the 60s were lost or won based on food or food shortages.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. When their supply lines couldn't keep them fed and stuff, then battles were lost and wars were lost over that. So food is very important, but I just want people to be considerate of agriculture. Another thing I want to touch on, since we all need water, I've got a real problem here in Iron County. Our water's declining. We've got people fighting against agriculture fighting against agriculture. Everybody's fighting about water. And when we look around at our hills with these pinyon juniper stands and stuff, that is where our water's going. And we need to put a lot of pressure on our congressional people and on our BLM and Forest Service. In FLIPMA and NIFMA, it gives us the right to maintain our watersheds, but we haven't exercised that right. Meanwhile, we've lost our water to these trees. I like to see some cedar trees, but we're talking millions and millions of trees that surround our valleys here in Iron County.
Well, and 75 to 100 years ago, right? The natural fires were keeping them at bay, right? They were getting consumed and replenishing the nutrients in the ground and things. Some of these trees suck every living thing out around them because of the acidity or the lack of light, and then lack of feed for wildlife. I mean, it's not just agricultural feed, it's wildlife can't survive either when these trees are suffocating them.
Yes, the monarch butterfly, they're threatening to list that as an endangered species, and pretty much the whole United States is habitat for that. But when you think about not having grass and flowers and things because we've got conifer trees, this is very important that we take back over. And I don't know how we do it, because we're fighting from the bottom up, but I think that one crazy sheep herder screaming about it isn't enough. We need the whole community actively pushing to get our watersheds back in better shape.
Well, and you bring up a really good point, because in the fall of 17, we had one of the largest fires in the nation, and it was because of dense forestation that hadn't been thinned out, that hadn't been maintained over the last 30 years. To some degree, right? I'm not the biologist, I'm not the Forest Service, right? But we knew, as just local people driving around in the mountains, if you couldn't see 10 feet into the forest, there's a problem.
And there's some really good projects going on up on the forest right now. They're cleaning some of this out and whatnot. But I had a farmer tell me a couple of days ago, since the Brian Head fire of 17, the Yankee Reservoir has had way more water than it was at before. It was still running over the other day. They've turned it out, but they had to turn it out a little more because it's still going over the spillway. And we had a fair snow year, but it wasn't really a record. Not like
No.
last year. Last year was pretty good, but you know, it made that much difference. All the drainage into that above there pretty much was in the Bryan Head Fire.
Well, and not to take away from Iron County, but I believe that it was last fall that the Federation also had a monthly meeting surrounding the Great Salt Lake water shortages. None of their drainage systems or tree alleyways through that have been maintained for more than 100 years, and people wonder where the water went.
Exactly.
There's no way Southern Utah can contribute to this, to the Salt Lake Basin water, but their tree consumption is significantly more than they give it credit for.
It is. I talked to the director of the DNR a week ago out to Vernal, and I asked him, I said, when are we going to force our right to maintain our watersheds? And he looked at me kind of funny, and he says, well, that's a good point. So I don't know how we go about that, but I know that it's going to take a lot of public pressure to get it done.
And you bring up another good point. You also serve on the Public Lands Council.
Yep, so I'm the chair of the Utah Public Lands Council. The Public Lands Council nationally was founded in 1968, and their sole mission is to keep public land ranchers grazing. And grazing is very important for fire mitigation and the production of food and fiber, and so without livestock grazing, our wildlife doesn't do well, we have fire risk and all that. So anyway, I would encourage all public land grazers to get a hold of me and join the Public Lands Council here in Utah. We've started our own organization to help pay our national dues to stay connected with that. But we've been working on a lot of issues where there's been overreach and abuse, and the federal government, whether it's the forest or the BLM, not following the rules. And so we engage on every one of those issues that's brought to us. So if you should be a member, and you should tell us your problems, because we will support you.
Well, and what's really incredible about that is, remind me the percentage of state or federal land in the state of Utah.
77% of Utah is public land, either state or federal.
And of that, how much of it is grazed? All of it?
Pretty much all of it.
Right.
There's some they've got kind of locked out of to where it's nothing anymore, but.
Well, and it should be grazed on, right?
It should be.
But what's curious, and most people don't know this, and it's interesting to me just because I like paying attention to, the details, but a sheep doesn't eat what a cow eats. A cow doesn't eat what a horse eats, and a horse doesn't eat what an elk or a deer eat, right? There's all different forages, there's all different things growing that each one of these animals consumes, right? And then, the fertilizer part. The seeds are transmitted and taken through the different areas to replenish what has happened.
Well, and when an animal steps on a seed, it just has a knack of planting them. It won't grow on top of the ground. It doesn't need to be inches in the ground, but it does need to be covered by earth. And they have a knack of planting it. So grazed at the proper times, they maintain.
Right, and there's definitely a balance.
Sure.
There's a balance to everything in life, right? There's yin and yang, there's light and dark, there's all of these different things. And without some of these key elements,
one might even see opposition in all things.
Well, but everything has to have friction to grow, right?
And water.
And water. But even still, all of those different elements, if we're going to grow our footprint and making sure that we're able to still feed America, right, through feed and fiber, we have to push back.
Yes.
There's been a lot of overreach over the last 50 years.
Yes.
There's been a lot of legislative changes in the last 30 days of law enforcement's ability to go through. Federal agencies can't just make up their own rules anymore.
Yeah, the Supreme Court ruling on the Chevron deference case, that was huge. Because that's kind of taken it so that the federal agencies can't just write rules. It has to.
Right,
can be overseen by Congress like it's supposed to be.
Right. Well, and the other key part of this too is to me, our sheriff's department is the strongest law enforcement locally. Gratefully, they're totally integrated with ag at this time because they helped us, and with the commissioners, Marilyn, Paul, and Mike, we made sure the livestock trail, map was completed, because that's super important to making sure that people moving into our area also know and understand and maintain what's happening here.
Yeah, but it's good that people can see. They might say, oh, well, if I live here, I'm going to have the sheep parade 10 times a year,
Right.
If I live over there, I'll be clear away from them. So it's a good thing for the public to be able to look at too, and everything. And we just ask that when we do need to move up a road or whatever, that you're courteous, and we'll try and be courteous too.
No, you're good. So in our last 5 minutes, what is the most critical thing we need to know about?
I don't know. I think that I've talked about several things that have got to be right at the top.
So the PLC membership, making sure that...
Yes, and our water supply. Our water supply, we have got to do something with our water. And the only way, this time in the state of Utah, we divert 7.75 or 74% of the water. The rest
7%.
is consumed by the vegetation, evaporation, all those things. But divert means put in a ditch, a lake, a pipe, or whatever to go to homes or agriculture. Well, if we could limit weeds, so to speak, pinyon juniper, dense pine forest, if we could limit the consumption and divert 9%, look at how much water we would have.
Right, if we're only using 7% now, and it's keeping things at bay, not overfilling, but keeping things at bay, what would another 2% do?
I wish I'd seen the numbers the other day, but I can't tell you how many more acre feet that would mean. But it would be a huge game changer for our communities, because all of Utah is struggling for water right now.
Right.
It's starting to limit growth in places, and it's definitely taking ag land away from agriculture to put into houses, and that's kind of a double-edged sword, because I don't think houses taste good, but I don't think you can live under a bush either. So
there's definitely a balance, and I think that throughout the next, the next generations of growth, right? The next 30, 40, 50 years of growth, we'll start to see more of a balance, or hopefully more of a protected balance, because ag is one of those things. And the state of Utah feeds much more than just the United States. Like we sell hay, we sell animals, like all of it throughout the entire nation, and all of it creates economic activity here. We're still one of the top, agriculture activity is still one of the top economic producers in Iron County.
yes,
No, I have a question.
Oh, you have a question. Sorry, I thought we were out of time.
No. Well, we're getting there, but I have a question. This is all interesting discussion, and I agree with a lot, but it seems to me, Scott, there's another problem, Brian, that's that some people are just saying, I don't want to do this anymore.
in agriculture.
In agriculture.
And we worry about that in the Farm Bureau and agriculture. It's a hard way to make a living.
Yeah.
It's a 7-day, all-day job, and it's hard. And our kids are sometimes looking, and then they're like, well, these other people are making a pretty good living and only working 4 days a week. So some of this is changing due to that.
Yeah.
There's no doubt.
That to me is a concern, because we've got to get the next generations coming up.
But we have a lot of trouble in our industries with imports, and we're competing against other countries under totally different regulations. We're highly regulated here in the United States with different things, and that drives up our production cost, and so we need to figure out how to make more money. And people are saying, "Oh my word, meat's expensive," and it is.
Well, and what's curious too about that is it seems, now correct me where I'm wrong, Scott, because I don't do this every day, right? But every cost that was added, it found its way to the bottom of where the producers are. So all of the fuel costs, the top line didn't see it. It got pushed down to the bottom to where the producer's at. All of the traveling costs, the processing costs, the water costs, all of the different things for fiber versus meat, all of those extra costs that have been changing drastically over the last 5 years have all been pushed down and pushed down. And at some point, people can't survive because the overhead has been just passed to the next guy down the road. The problem is our producers are the last person on that road, and we can't keep them afloat because there's such a disparity between the top and the bottom. And then that goes into a whole nother radio show.
So one of our presidents, right, said agriculture buys retail, sells wholesale, and pays the freight both ways. And there's a lot of truth to that, but there's a lot of us still wanting to make a living trying to do this, and we've got to have food. Somebody's got to do it.
Scott, it's always a blessing to have you on with Wired Wednesday. It's fun to get to talk about all the fun things in ag and some of the not so fun things, but it's the awareness and the education part that we're trying to keep the community connected to ag.
Thank you for having me, McKenna.
Thank you so much for joining us for Wired Wednesday. This is your host, McKenna Hansen with Farm Bureau Financial Services at 435-592-2021 and with Anything Real Estate at KW Realty with the Larkin Group at GoCedarCity.com.
Isn't that different? Isn't it flipped? The Larkin Group with KW Realty?
Yes. Oh, goodness. One of these days I'm going to get my extra right.
You know, I know the problem is it's not raining outside.
It is. I was so good when it was raining. The dreariness. The blessings of water.
It seems to me that's when you're in your best game.
Ah.
See you next week.